Simplemente wow. Dicen que los reviews de Joker están bien malos con Lady Gaga. Así que yo no voy a mentir. Tengo que verlo. Tengo que ver esta barbaridad. Tenemos que ver simple y sencillamente por qué DC decide hacer algo como esto. La primera película del Joker para mí no estuvo mal. Era algo bien distinto a lo que aquellos que nos gusta el universo de DC. A mí me encanta Superman, me encanta DC, me gusta Marvel y DC, ¿sabes? Al nivel de que recuerdo cuando le metí a DC Universe Online. Uf, qué tiempo esos con Plinio, Gerald, Mark estuvo un ratito con nosotros también. Nos abandonó bastante rápido, pero estuvo un ratito. Pero DC, en verdad para mí, si tú vas a tocar al Joker, especialmente Batman, personajes tan icónicos, es para no arruinarlo. Como acaba de hacer Star Wars con la serie de Acolyte y Anakin Skywalker, el Chosen One. No arruinen lo que ya está bien. ¿Por qué? ¿Cuál es la necesidad? ¿Por qué? Vamos a ver esto, porque esto es un completo desastre.
2 years ago, the name Arthur Fleck hit Gotham like a hurricane.
Joker Folie charges out of the gate with a novel approach to DC's most.
En verdad a mí no me gustaría ni ver esto, pero tengo que verlo. Me siento obligado a verlo. By the way, perdonen si se escucha bien duro. Déjame bajarlo ya aquí, que yo estaba gritando aquí con esto bien
Not a
alto.
very interesting one at that. The film works best when pushing toward new ways of seeing its central character, often through the eyes of a wonderfully realized Harley Quinn, played by Lady Gaga. But it too often insists on returning to familiar territory, and on occasion, familiar footage.
Yo no tengo
instead
problema
of
con los
blazing a new
musicales.
path.
For once
No es que tengo problema,
in my life,
pero DC no es un musical. Y si lo íbamos a adaptar,
someone who needs me.
hubiéramos hecho algo bien,
Arkham Asylum is
¿sabes?
now home to Joker
Vamos allá.
/ Arthur Fleck, whose daily
Lo que he
routine
visto
involves
y
being
lo-
awoken by gruff prison
Vamos allá.
guards who demand jokes from him while he empties his latrine. It seems like Arthur no longer speaks very much. He certainly no longer smiles. Director Todd Phillips, with the help of cinematographer Lawrence Sher, captures this mechanical mourning process in long, unbroken takes that draw the viewer into Joker's grimy world. As he awaits trial, his lawyer, played by Catherine Keener, insists he pleads insanity. She figures that the best defense is to treat Joker and Arthur as distinct personalities occupying the same body.
Hey Fleck, you got a joke for us today?
Arthur, like most people around him, knows this is more of a legal strategy than anything resembling the truth. But the question of how his adopted persona changes him constantly looms. On one hand, separating Joker's actions from Arthur's and framing them as a trauma response might get him an easier hearing. On the
Ay, Dios mío. Yo veo esto en verdad y no sé ni por qué le pusieron el nombre de Joker. De corazón, para mí hay gente que va a decir, chico, pero que es el Joker, que si es otra perspectiva del Joker, que... ¿De qué tú me estás hablando? ¿Tú sabes lo que es DC? Batman. Lo que es el Joker, lo que significa el Joker para los amantes de Batman. O sea, yo tengo un hermano, mi mejor amigo, Mark, fanático de Batman. Arruinale Batman, atrévete. Para que tú veas.
other hand,
Y
when he
acabas de
draws
arruinar
the
el
gaze
villano
of
más
fellow
icónico
patient
de
and
Batman,
avowed
para
admirer
mí.
Harleen Lee Quinzel, it seems like
Pero
Joker
nada.
is who he wants
Vamos a ver
and
esto.
needs to be.
For once in my life, I didn't feel so alone anymore.
Esto hay que verlo
Since
aunque
the
los
two
ojos te
meet during
sangren.
musical therapy, real and imagined songs are scattered throughout Folie Doux's runtime. These familiar Hollywood tunes and vintage pop hits are sung passionately by Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, and some are even mixed with Hildur Gudnadottir's eerie, booming score. The duo, at first, connects through song. They match each other's freak, the shared madness and delusion of the subtitle, what the French call Folie à deux. But much of this ends up sidelined during the movie's lengthy courtroom scenes, which promise chaos when Arthur begins representing himself. Unfortunately, the delirium of Phoenix smearing on the grease paint to play both attorney and defendant isn't quite delivered.
What's changed, Arthur?
En verdad esto hay que verlo. ¿Sabes? Yo solamente quiero ver qué tan mala puede ser.
After an initial hour set entirely within Arkham's walls, the sequel becomes a kind of referendum on the first Joker, though not in any meaningful, transformative way. Rather, it's merely an extension of the first film's plot in the most plotting and literal fashion. For a film that's almost entirely liberated from its comic book source material, Joker Folie à Deux is oddly constrained by its own predecessor. Returning characters show up to narrate events we've already seen, as Keener asks leading questions about Joker feeling like a distinct entity from Arthur. On the flip side, the prosecutor is a smarmy Harvey Dent, played by Industry's Harry Lawtie. This version of the comic's villainous Two-Face is a treat to watch at all times, though his line of argument sheds little light on Arthur's actions or state of mind.
Lo que pasa es que aquí... Esto es un universo de DC que yo no logro entender bien. Honestamente, es como que... No sé, a mí no me atrae así. Wow, la primera sí estuvo bastante cool. Empieza pues con todos los trastornos y yo decía, a ver, déjalo, se va a volver más Joker según lo que conocemos en DC. Y terminó como que dejándote con esa expectativa. Pero esto no es las expectativas para mí. Pero hay que verla.
Perhaps the standout of this extended segment is
Estaba
Gary,
loco por ver
Arthur's
esto, no
clown
es mentira.
colleague from the first movie, whose dwarfism comes ever so close to being the subject of Arthur's comedic riffing when he takes the stand. If the sequel comes close to articulating an actual point about Joker, that is to say the
Esa
persona
escena sí
and
estuvo
identity,
bufia
it's
en la
that the
primera.
coping mechanism that shields Arthur from the world's cruelty makes him cruel in turn.
El otro bien
However,
cagado de
like
que lo va a
many
matar y le da un
ideas
beso.
upon which Folie à Deux touches,
vemos, cuídate.
it's soon discarded. Similarly, Arthur's upbringing and abusive mother, detailed in Joker, are rehashed ad nauseum, while the topic of Arthur's future with Lee is quickly abandoned before it can offer any kind of thematic reflection.
Look around! Look at all these people!
This is the sequel's default MO, making it a frustrating experience beyond its initial Arkham-focused hour. At first, it creates a more careful and methodical aesthetic than Joker. Each scene is carefully composed.
Pongan un
each
poco de la
methodical
música
push-in
para-
has clear emotional intent. But as it
Bueno, es
progresses,
que
it does little with its camera worth commenting on.
Probablemente
A few
no.
dreamlike
No pongan nada de la música por el
flourishes do
copyright.
appear, though mostly to quote the familiar visuals of other musicals, like Jacques Demy's French New Wave landmark The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and Francis Ford Coppola's sincere, expressionistic One from the Heart.
We use music to make us whole.
Apart from these stray references, Phillips' expressionism is limited to making each environment and lighting source resemble, in some way, a harsh spotlight on a stage, silhouetting Joker and Lee until they become defined by their shape, their iconography. It's a great idea in theory, and taps into the performance aspect associated
Yo
with the
quisiera
Joker character.
hablar con
but it
Mark,
rarely
a ver qué
evolves
piensa de este
visually
Joker.
or conceptually.
Nunca le he preguntado
It's
a
just
Mark.
one of several things that ends up keeping the
gustaría saber
character
qué
in
piensa.
stasis, to the point that a vital emotional turn in the second half, which defines the movie's trajectory, comes entirely out of left field. It's one movie, and then suddenly, it's another.
I want to see the real you.
That said, Phoenix clearly knows this character inside and out by now. His posture is even more disconcerting this time. The actor is still shockingly gaunt, but the way he carries himself speaks to a body that has endured a life of abuse. Something as simple as uneven shoulders can go a long way. When Arthur decides to embrace the Joker part of himself, this posture changes.
En
almost
verdad
fixing itself,
tampoco
as
entiendo
Phoenix
por qué el cuerpo tan desnutrido. Sí, el abuso. ¿Sabe? Es que es un Joker que vuelvo y digo, sí, cuando tú ves la primera, tú dices socialmente cómo la sociedad afecta, sí. Pero tú esperas, ¿sabes? En DC el punto es como que, papi, ese Joker era simple y sencillamente alguien que era irrazonable. Era algo que era por llevarle la contraria a Batman. Aquí, esto es un Joker que no entiendo el motivo de por qué volvernos el Joker, por qué llamarlo el Joker. Simple y sencillamente una persona que sí, la sociedad lo ha afectado y ha hecho un par de cosas, pero esto no es el Joker. Para mí esto no es como que... Esto no es
rolls
el
out
Joker.
across the screen,
Esto no lo es.
luxuriantly, comfortably, and confidently, usually with a cigarette in hand. However, he never loses Arthur's inherent goofiness, even when putting on this front. As
Es
the
más,
Joker slips
quiero ver los comentarios de este video. Déjame ver los comentarios. Es más, vamos a terminar
Between
esto y
forms
vamos
of
a ver los
presentation,
comentarios.
His accent slips
Después
as
que le
well,
den
going from British
el-
to American Southern and back, as if he can't quite figure out who or what he wants to be.
Oye, y no tienes que estar de acuerdo
Joker
conmigo.
Folie à Deux has a not so
Te puede
secret
gustar
weapon.
la película.
It's Lady Gaga's rendition of Harley Quinn.
O sea, la actuación de él no es mala, no es que la actuación es mala. Él actúa exagerado. A mí me encanta su actuación.
The energy of these segments only goes so far.
Pero hay que ser
because
honesto.
affording Gaga the
Esto no es
chance to run
DC.
the emotional and tonal gamut would have likely resulted in one of the greatest feats of screen acting modern Hollywood has ever seen. She even modulates her singing voice between the real Lee, an unprofessional who belts with an uneven passion, and Arthur's imagined version of her, whose singing is more, well, Gaga-esque. Sadly, she's constrained by a subtle performance in a film that's anything but.
Let's give the people what they want.
The careful line she walks between adoration and mania is entirely worthwhile, and temporarily allows a commentary on fandom obsession to sneak its way into the picture. Lee is practically a Manson girl. However, in true Phillips fashion, this idea never really comes to fruition. Before it has the chance, Joker Folie à Deux
El
switches
Bebo nos
tangents
ha
yet again.
contado toda la
That's to say
película.
nothing of the movie's intriguing Oedipal
En
undercurrent,
este video pusieron en
which
algún
frames
lado
Arthur's desire for
spoiler
adoration
free
as a response to a lack of
o
maternal
pusieron
warmth.
que hay
No
spoiler.
prizes for guessing how far this gets.
I got the sneaking suspicion that we're not giving the people what they want.
Joker, though scattered in its politics and committed to aping other, better filmmakers, at least had unifying visual and thematic motifs. It felt complete, albeit cobbled together. Joker Folie à Deux departs from this approach, initially for better, though eventually for worse. Its more considered frames and character dynamics set the stage for musical romance that never blossoms, visually, acoustically, or emotionally, giving way to a
Un musical romance. Un musical...
sequel weighed down entirely by its predecessor, despite how hard it tries to escape its orbit.
How about you, Arthur?
Benedict, por favor.
Do you still think you're a
Yo
star?
llevo aquí
The worst
sufriendo...
thing about Joker Folie à Deux is its unfulfilled potential. It begins with the promise of a novel approach to the Joker and Harley Quinn, placing them in a world where the opposite of cruelty is musical romance. Unfortunately, the DC sequel gets bogged down by a lengthy courtroom saga, which not only keeps the dazzling Lady Gaga away from the spotlight, but centers the movie entirely around its own predecessor, without doing or saying anything new. For more movie
¿Están viendo eso? ¿Te están- ¡Wow! Pero es que, mira, mucho le dieron. ¿Sabes? Eso es demasiado. Un 5. Vamos a los comentarios rápido. Yo quiero ir directo a los comentarios. Pero, ¿sabes? ¿Y el mouse? ¿Para dónde tú vas, Bebo? Vamos directo a los comentarios. Vamos a leer esto. Perhaps we were too harsh on you, IGN. Esta gente disculpándose. You think? Sí, Joker was a movie that did not need a sequel at all. Totalmente de acuerdo. El Joker no necesitaba para nada una secuela. Y mucho menos musical. O sea, no es que los musicales son malos. Hay musicales buenos. Pero es que eso no es el Joker. Pregúntale a Mark. IGN is right for a change. People are jumping on IGN for giving, okay, making it music about the stupidest idea ever. Es que eso no es lo que quieren los fans de DC, ¿sabes? A la gente que le gusta el Joker, no querían ver un musical del Joker. ¿De qué tú estás hablando? O sea, ¿en serio? ¿En serio? Un musical del Joker. They gave it a 5, feels super. Joker 1, Metacritic 59. Joker 2, 54. So maybe not for the critics again. They give this movie the same score. Lost me at musical. Vuelvo y digo, esto nunca debió haber sido un musical. Bueno, el Bebo que hizo la película, papi, a mí no me hablen más de DC, yo no quiero saber más de DC, no es esto, que sí. Parece que ese Bebo lo obligaron a hacer la película. Porque no quiere saber ya nada. Pero no fue idea tuya hacer la musical. ¿De quién fue la idea de hacer esto un musical? ¿Sabes? ¿De quién fue la idea de arruinar el Joker de esta manera? ¿Sabes quién es el responsable? Alguien que tiene un tweet por ahí. Mira, yo fui el que tuve la grandiosa idea de hacer el Joker un musical. Y para colmo, con nada dentro del universo de DC tú ves ese musical y tú, ¿hay algo por ahí que se parezca a DC? O sea, ni en un periódico aparece Batman. Tan siquiera. No aparece tampoco que por ahí está, qué sé yo, Catwoman robando. Bebo, ¿qué pasó? ¿Qué le pasa a DC? ¿Sabes? ¿Qué le pasa a DC? DC, ¿cuándo te perdimos así? Mira, en verdad, vamos a seguir viendo un par de cosas por ahí, corillo. No olvides que me puedes seguir en donde. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, X, para que vean todo lo que estamos haciendo, sean parte del journey. Así que, corillo, antes de irme, como siempre yo les digo, Happy Gaming. Los veo, corillo, en verdad.